the scent of aviation fuel mixed with the cold sweat running down the pilots' backs. The tropical humidity clung to skin like a second layer of clothing, and the heat was already suffocating even before dawn. The Sulu Sea breathed in the distance, invisible in the darkness, but present in every gust of salty breeze that swept across the improvised runway. Flight Lieutenant David Davo Morrison adjusted his aviator goggles for the third time in 5 minutes. His hands trembled, not from fear but from something worse, anticipation. He knew this tremor well. It was his body preparing for what lay ahead. Around him, 16 Vought F-4U Corsairs stood lined up like sleeping predators. Their triple-bladed propellers gleamed weakly under the scattered work lights. Each aircraft bore the distinctive gull-wing design that made them unmistakable in the sky, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who saw them coming. Davo pressed his palm against the cool metal of his Corsair's fuselage. Beneath the dark blue paint, someone had stenciled the name Margaret's Promise in white letters. Margaret, his wife. 7,000 miles away in Sydney, probably hanging laundry in their backyard, unaware that her husband was about to fly into what intelligence called the most heavily defended convoy route in the Pacific. Thinking about her again, mate? The voice belonged to Flight Lieutenant Tommy Chen, Davo's wingman for the past 14 months. Tommy's family had emigrated from Guangzhou to Melbourne when he was 5. Now, at 23, he flew like he'd been born with wings. Always, Davo said quietly. Tommy checked his watch. 18 minutes until wheels up. Command says the convoy left Sandakan at midnight. 12 cargo vessels, maybe more. 4 destroyers confirmed. They're running supplies to the Japanese garrison at Jesselton. 4 destroyers, Davo repeated, letting the weight of those words settle. Destroyers meant anti-aircraft guns. Lots of them. Intelligence reliable? As reliable as anything in this war. Tommy's smile didn't reach his eyes. Coast Watchers radioed confirmation 2 hours ago. Said the convoy's moving slow. Heavily loaded. Heavily loaded meant critical supplies. Medicine. Ammunition. Food. Everything the isolated Japanese forces needed to keep resisting. And everything Davo's squadron needed to send to the bottom of the ocean. The briefing tent had been oppressively hot 3 hours earlier, packed with pilots smelling of sweat and cigarettes. Wing Commander Harrison, everyone called him Harry the Hammer, had stood before a makeshift map of Borneo's northwestern coast, his face carved from stone. "Gentlemen," Harry had said, his Australian accent thick as treacle. "This isn't a patrol. This isn't reconnaissance. This is a killing mission." The room had gone silent. "Tokyo's supply lines are stretched thinner than my patience. Every ship we send down is one less meal for their soldiers, one less bullet for their rifles. The convoy leaving Sandakan tonight represents 3 months of supplies. We take it out, and we accelerate the end of this bloody war." Harry had pointed to a spot on the map where the coastline curved like a scar. "We hit them here. Balabac Strait. Narrow waters, limited maneuverability. They'll be sitting ducks if we time it right. If we time it right." Those 5 words carried the weight of 16 lives. Now, standing on the flight line, Davo watched the eastern horizon for the first hint of dawn. The plan was simple in theory, deadly in execution. Take off in darkness, fly low over the water to avoid radar detection, arrive at the strait just as morning light gave them visibility, strike fast, strike hard, and get out before Japanese fighters from Jesselton could respond. Simple, except nothing in war was ever simple. "Morrison, Chen," Squadron Leader Patrick Reeves strode across the tarmac, his boots crunching on loose gravel. Pat was 31, ancient by fighter pilot standards, with a face that had forgotten how to smile somewhere over Rabaul in 1943. "Sir," both pilots responded in unison. "Weather's turning," Pat said. "Monsoon front moving in from the northeast. We'll have cloud cover, which helps with approach, but visibility will deteriorate fast. You two are leading the second flight. Stay tight on my wing during the run-in. When we reach the strait, I want textbook attack patterns. Dive, release, climb, regroup. No heroics, no second passes. We go in once, we make it count, we come home." Understood, sir, Davo said. Pat's eyes softened, just for a moment. Your wife sent a letter through command channels. It's in your quarters. I made sure it got there yesterday. Davo's throat tightened. Thank you, sir. Read it when you get back, Pat said. Then his voice hardened again. Because you are coming back. All of you, that's an order. As Pat walked away to brief the other flights, Tommy nudged Davo's shoulder. He's right, you know. We're coming back. We've flown 47 missions together. This is just number 48. 48, Davo echoed. Each mission was a coin flip with death. 47 consecutive wins didn't improve the odds on number 48. Around them, ground crews swarmed over the Corsairs, performing final checks. Mechanics climbed on wings, inspecting control surfaces. Armorers loaded the last belts of 50 caliber ammunition into the 6 wing-mounted machine guns, 2,400 rounds per aircraft, enough to shred anything made of wood or steel. Chief Petty Officer William Bill Stone supervised the loading of the high-explosive rockets beneath each wing. 8 rockets per plane, 5-inch diameter, 60-pound warheads. Designed to punch through a ship's hull and detonate inside, turning vessels into floating coffins. Bill caught Davo's eye and gave a thumbs up. Good to go. 04:47 a.m. 3 minutes. Davo climbed into his Corsair's cockpit, settling into the worn leather seat that had molded to his body over hundreds of hours. The instrument panel glowed faintly. Altimeter, airspeed indicator, fuel gauge, engine temperature. Everything exactly where it should be. He pulled Margaret's last letter from his flight suit pocket. The paper was soft from being read and reread. Her handwriting was delicate, each word carefully formed. My darling David, the garden is blooming beautifully this year. The roses you planted before you left are finally showing color, brilliant reds and soft pinks. I sit with them every evening and pretend you're sitting beside me. Come home safe. Come home soon. Our daughter needs to meet her father. All my love, Margaret. Our daughter. The letter was dated 3 weeks ago. By now, Margaret would be 7 months along. Davo hadn't known when he deployed. The news had reached him through military mail channels, typed on official paper, but Margaret's joy radiated through every word. A daughter. He was going to have a daughter. He carefully refolded the letter and tucked it back into his pocket, right over his heart. 04:50 a.m. Green flare arced across the pre-dawn sky. Engines roared to life, one after another, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engines thundering like mechanical gods. The sound was overwhelming, vibrating through bone and blood. Davo's hands moved through the startup sequence automatically. Mixture rich, throttle forward, fuel pumps on, magnetos check. The Corsair shuddered and came alive beneath him, eager, hungry. Tommy's voice crackled through the radio. Flight 2, Charlie ready. Flight 2, Delta ready, Davo responded. Pat's voice cut through on the command channel. All flights, this is lead. We are go for Operation Serpent Strike. Maintain radio silence until contact. God be with us. One by one, the Corsairs began rolling forward, their tails lifting as they gained speed. Pat's aircraft was first, vanishing into the darkness at the end of the runway, then climbing steeply, navigation lights blinking once before disappearing completely. Davo's turn. He pushed the throttle forward. The Corsair surged ahead, pressing him back into his seat. The runway lights blurred into streaks. 80 knots, 100, 120. He pulled back on the stick. The earth fell away. Darkness swallowed him whole. Below, Labuan Airfield became a distant memory. Ahead, somewhere in the vast black ocean, a Japanese convoy steamed slowly toward its destiny. And 16 Australian pilots flew through the night to deliver it. The world had become nothing but darkness and the rhythm of the engine. Davo kept his eyes locked on the faint blue exhaust flames from Tommy's Corsair, flying 30 feet to his left. In formation, flying at night, over water, with no horizon visible. Those tiny flames were everything. the only reference point between staying airborne and plunging into the black ocean below. His altimeter read 210 feet. Low enough to slip under Japanese radar, high enough to avoid hitting the water if he misjudged in the darkness. The margin for error was measured in heartbeats. The Corsair vibrated steadily beneath him, the engine's deep growl a constant companion. Davo had learned to read his aircraft like a living thing. Every vibration, every subtle shift in sound meant something. Right now, she was running perfectly, hungry for what lay ahead. Through his headset, silence. Pat had ordered radio blackout to avoid detection. 16 aircraft flying in near total darkness, maintaining formation through instinct and trust. Davo checked his watch. 05:24 a.m. They'd been airborne for 34 minutes. Another 16 minutes until they reached the interception point. 16 minutes to think, to remember, to doubt. He thought about the briefing, about Harry's words. This is a killing mission. Davo had completed 47 combat missions. He'd fired his guns at enemy aircraft, strafed coastal installations, provided cover for ground troops. But this was different. This was hunting ships full of men who couldn't shoot back effectively, couldn't run, couldn't hide. Cargo vessels, destroyers, hundreds of sailors. His hand unconsciously touched the letter over his heart. Our daughter needs to meet her father. Tommy's voice suddenly crackled in his headset, barely a whisper. 2 Charlie to 2 Delta. You still with me, mate? Pat's radio silence rule technically prohibited communication, but Tommy had always bent rules when he sensed his wingman needed anchoring. Still here, Davo whispered back. Good. Stay sharp. Weather's building ahead. Davo peered through his canopy. Tommy was right. The eastern horizon, still dark but beginning to show the faintest hint of pre-dawn gray, was building a wall of clouds. The monsoon front Pat had mentioned. It would give them cover, but it would also make the attack run infinitely more complex. 05:31 a.m. The darkness began to fracture into shades of deep blue. Dawn was coming, reluctant, but inevitable. With light came visibility. With visibility came danger. Pat's voice finally broke radio silence. Lead to all flights. Target area in 10 minutes. Descend to 100 feet. Maintain formation. Arm weapons. Davo's hands moved automatically. He flipped the master armament switch, heard the satisfying click as the electrical system powered up his guns and rockets. A row of green lights illuminated on his panel. All 6 machine guns ready. All 8 rockets armed. He was now flying a loaded weapon. The ocean below had transformed from pure black to dark slate, visible now in the growing light. Whitecaps dotted the surface. The monsoon was churning the water. Davo dropped his altitude to exactly 100 feet, close enough to see individual waves. Flying this low at this speed left zero room for mistakes. One wrong move, one moment of inattention, and the sea would claim him instantly. 05:37 a.m. Lead to all flights. Visual contact. Convoy bearing 045, range 8 miles. Davo's pulse quickened. 8 miles, 4 minutes at their current speed. Execute attack pattern Delta. First flight takes destroyers. Second and third flights take cargo vessels. Fourth flight provides top cover. Break on my mark. Davo strained his eyes forward. At first, nothing. Then, there. Small dark shapes on the horizon, silhouettes against the slightly lighter sky. Ships. The convoy. The Japanese vessels were arranged in a defensive box formation, destroyers at the corners, cargo ships in the center. It was a standard protection pattern, designed to create overlapping fields of defensive fire. It wouldn't be enough. All flights, this is lead. Remember your training. Dive angle 35 degrees, release at 400 feet, brake hard starboard. Do not, I repeat, do not, make second passes. Execute in 3, 2, 1, mark. Pat's Corsair suddenly pulled up sharply, climbing into the rapidly brightening sky. Behind him, the other aircraft in first flight followed like a choreographed dance. They reached approximately 1,000 feet, rolled inverted, and came screaming down toward the destroyers. Second flight, execute, Pat ordered. Davo pushed his throttle forward and pulled back on his stick. The Corsair responded instantly, clawing for altitude. His altimeter spun upward, 300 feet, 500, 700, 900. At exactly 1,000 feet, he rolled the aircraft inverted. The world flipped. Sky became ocean. Ocean became sky. Blood rushed to his head. Then he pushed the stick forward and dove. The Corsair plunged earthward like a stooping falcon. The airspeed indicator climbed rapidly, 250 knots, 300, 350. Wind screamed over the canopy. The whole aircraft shuddered with speed and fury. Below him, the convoy grew from toy-sized to real with terrifying speed. He could see individual details now. The rust-streaked hulls, the deck cargo covered in tarps, sailors running to their stations. Anti-aircraft fire began erupting from the destroyers, bright orange tracers arcing upward, trying to find the diving Corsairs. The sky filled with deadly fireworks. Davo ignored it. Tunnel vision took over. His entire world narrowed to one thing, the cargo vessel in his sights. A medium-sized freighter, perhaps 300 feet long, sitting low in the water. Heavily loaded, just as intelligence had reported. His targeting reticle aligned perfectly with the ship's center mass. 800 feet, 700, 600. Anti-aircraft rounds snapped past his canopy, close enough to hear, not close enough to hit. Not yet. 500 feet, 400 feet. He pressed the rocket release. 8 rockets leaped from beneath his wings, trailing smoke and fire. They covered the distance to the freighter in less than 2 seconds. Davo didn't wait to see the impact. He yanked the stick hard right, pulling 7 Gs, his vision graying at the edges as blood drained from his brain. Behind him, the first rocket struck. The explosions were massive, far larger than he'd expected. The ship must have been carrying ammunition or fuel. Secondary detonations ripped through the vessel, tearing it apart from the inside. A fireball mushroomed upward, black smoke billowing into the dawn sky. Second Flight 2 Delta, confirmed hit. Tommy's excited voice came through the radio. That ship is finished. Davo leveled out at 500 feet, breathing hard, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked back. The freighter was breaking apart, its back snapped, both ends tilting upward as the center section sank. Small figures, sailors, were jumping into the water, desperate to escape the inferno. Men. Drowning men. Enemy men, yes, but men nonetheless. Davo forced himself to look away. All flights damage report. Pat's voice cut through the chaos. One by one, pilots checked in. 14 aircraft reporting successful attacks. 2 aircraft damaged but airborne. 0 losses. 0 losses. They'd achieved complete surprise. Below, the convoy was in chaos. 2 destroyers were burning, one already listing heavily. 4 of the 12 cargo vessels were either sinking or engulfed in flames. The remaining ships were scattering, trying to escape, but the narrow strait gave them nowhere to run. Fourth flight, enemy fighters inbound from the northeast. Range 5 miles, Angels 10. Davo's stomach dropped. Japanese fighters. Probably Zeros or Oscars from Jesselton, scrambled the moment the attack began. All flights, this is lead. Mission accomplished. Form up on me, heading 270. We're going home. Pat's voice was calm, but Davo could hear the tension underneath. They'd completed the attack, but now came the dangerous part, getting away before those fighters caught them. The Corsairs began regrouping, forming into a loose combat formation. Davo slid back into position on Tommy's wing, constantly scanning the sky for enemy aircraft. There, Tommy called. 11 o'clock high. Davo looked up and saw them. 6 Japanese fighters, diving from the cloud layer like predatory birds. They'd spotted the Corsairs and were coming in fast. Fourth flight, engage and delay, Pat ordered. All other flights, maintain course. Do not break formation. 4 Corsairs from 4th flight peeled off, climbing to meet the Japanese fighters head-on. The 2 groups merged in a swirling dogfight, tracer fire crisscrossing the morning sky. Davo forced himself not to watch. His job was to maintain formation, get home, survive. Let fourth flight do their job. But one Japanese fighter broke through the screen. An A6M0 painted dark green, diving straight toward second flight, straight toward Davo. The Zero's guns began firing, tracers walking across the sky, searching for him. Davo broke hard left, Tommy breaking right, splitting their formation to confuse the attacker. The Zero followed Davo. Time seemed to slow. Davo could see the Japanese pilot in his cockpit, could see the flash of his guns, could feel the Corsair shuddering as rounds struck his tail section. He was hit. Warning lights flashed on his panel. The control stick felt sluggish. Damaged control surfaces. The Zero was lining up for another pass. Davo made a decision. He chopped his throttle, extended his flaps, and stood the Corsair on its tail. The aircraft bled speed instantly, a maneuver the heavier Corsair shouldn't be able to do, but Davo had practiced it hundreds of times. The Zero, traveling much faster, overshot him. For one perfect moment, the Japanese fighter was directly in front of Davo, close enough to see the rising sun painted on its fuselage. Davo pressed the trigger. All 6 machine guns fired simultaneously. The recoil shook the entire aircraft. 50 caliber rounds, armor-piercing incendiaries, tore into the Zero's engine and cockpit. The Japanese fighter exploded in midair. No parachute emerged from the fireball. Davo's hands were shaking on the stick. Tommy's voice. 2 Delta, that was incredible. You got him. But Davo felt no triumph. Only exhaustion, and the cold knowledge of what he'd just done. He'd taken a life. Face to face. Close enough to see. 2 Delta, form up, Pat ordered. We're clear. Fourth flight drove them off. Let's go home. Davo brought his damaged Corsair back into formation. The control surfaces were responding, barely. He'd make it back. Probably. Behind them, pillars of black smoke rose from Balabac Strait, marking the gravesite of Japan's convoy. The mission was a success. But as Davo flew westward toward Labuan, the rising sun at his back, all he could think about was Margaret. And the child who would one day ask him, "What did you do in the war, Daddy?" What would he tell her? The damaged Corsair fought Davo with every mile. The control stick pulled left constantly, requiring steady right pressure just to maintain level flight. His damaged tail surfaces created drag that cost him speed and fuel. The fuel gauge needle hovered dangerously close to empty. He'd used more than planned during the dogfight, and the damaged aircraft was consuming fuel faster than normal. Sweat dripped into his eyes despite the cool morning air rushing through the bullet holes in his canopy. His arms ached from fighting the controls, but Labuan was close now. 10 minutes, maybe less. He could make it. He had to make it. Tommy's voice crackled through the radio, calm but concerned. 2 Delta, how's she handling? Like a wounded bird, Davo replied, his voice tight. But she's still flying. That's what matters. You've got this, mate. I can see the airfield. We're almost home. Home. The word felt strange. Labuan wasn't home. Home was Sydney, 7,000 miles away. Home was Margaret, reading his letters in their small kitchen. Home was a daughter he'd never met, growing inside his wife, waiting to enter a world still at war. Pat's voice came through on the command channel. All flights, Labuan Tower has us on visual. Landing priority to damaged aircraft. 2 Delta, you're cleared for immediate approach. Emergency crews are standing by. Understood, lead, Davo responded. He could see the airfield now, a brown scar cut into the green jungle, the runway stretching like a lifeline. Fire trucks and ambulances were positioned along the edge, tiny red dots waiting for potential disaster. Davo began his descent, carefully nursing the damaged Corsair lower. Every control input had to be gentle, deliberate. The aircraft had brought him this far. He owed it his complete focus for these final moments. 1,000 feet. 800. 600. The runway grew larger. He could see ground crews running to their positions, faces turned upward, watching his approach. 400 feet. He extended his landing gear. The mechanical grinding sound reassured him. At least that system still worked. 3 green lights confirmed all wheels were down and locked. 200 feet. He lined up with the runway center line, fighting the aircraft's tendency to drift left. His damaged tail was making the approach unpredictable, but years of training took over. Muscle memory, instinct, 100 feet, 50. The Corsair crossed the runway threshold. Davo pulled back on the throttle, raised the nose slightly, felt for the ground. The main wheels touched first. A solid, beautiful contact. Then the tail wheel settled. He was down. He immediately applied brakes, but gently. The damaged tail made steering difficult. The Corsair slewed slightly left, but Davo corrected, brought it back to center, and finally rolled to a stop halfway down the runway. He'd made it. Davo sat motionless for several seconds, his hands still gripping the stick and throttle, breathing hard. His entire body was shaking, adrenaline finally releasing its grip. Emergency crews swarmed the aircraft immediately. A crew chief climbed onto the wing, peered through the canopy, gave him a thumbs up. Davo released his harness, slid the canopy back, and pulled himself out of the cockpit. His legs almost buckled when his boots hit the ground. Strong hands steadied him, ground crew members, their faces concerned. "You all right, sir?" one of them asked. "I'm fine," Davo said automatically, though he wasn't sure that was true. He turned to look at his Corsair. In the morning light, the damage was worse than he'd thought. The tail section was riddled with holes, at least 20 bullet strikes. One stabilizer had a jagged tear running nearly halfway across. It was a miracle the aircraft had stayed airborne. Chief Petty Officer Bill Stone walked around the damaged Corsair, shaking his head. "Lieutenant Morrison, you flew this home? Half the control surfaces are barely attached." "She wanted to make it back," Davo said quietly. "I just helped." Bill met his eyes, understanding passing between them. Aircraft weren't just machines to the men who flew them. They were partners, protectors. This Corsair had saved Davo's life today. "We'll have her patched up and ready to fly again," Bill promised. "Might take a few days, but she'll be good as new." "Thank you, Chief." Tommy landed moments later, his Corsair undamaged, and sprinted across the tarmac to Davo. He grabbed his wingman's shoulders, grinning broadly. "You magnificent lunatic. That Zero never knew what hit him. That maneuver. I've never seen anything like it." Davo managed a weak smile. "Desperation breeds creativity." "Desperation? That was artistry!" But Davo couldn't share Tommy's enthusiasm. All he could think about was the Japanese pilot, the man who'd tried to shoot him down, the man he'd eliminated in self-defense. A man who probably had a family too. A wife, maybe children. Pat approached, his expression unreadable. "Morrison, Chen, good flying out there, both of you." "Thank you, sir," they replied in unison. Pat looked directly at Davo. "That Zero would have picked off half the squadron if you hadn't stopped him. You saved lives today. Remember that." Davo nodded, but the words felt hollow. "Debriefing in 30 minutes, Pat continued. "Get cleaned up, get some food. Then we talk about what happened out there." 07:15. AM Squadron, Mess Hall. The mess hall was crowded with returning pilots, all talking at once, the volume rising with post-mission adrenaline. Men described their attack runs, compared damage assessments, replayed the dogfight with the Japanese fighters. Davo sat alone at a corner table, a plate of powdered eggs and toast in front of him, untouched. He wasn't hungry. His hands still trembled slightly, a delayed reaction he'd experienced after previous missions, but never this intensely. Tommy slid into the seat across from him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He pushed one across the table. "Drink. Doctor's orders." "You're not a doctor." "Close enough." Tommy studied his friend's face. "You're thinking too much. Someone has to." "Davo, listen to me." Tommy's voice dropped, became serious. "What you did today was necessary. That Zero pilot, he knew the risks. Same as us. He made his choice. You made yours. You survived. That's all that matters." "Is it?" Davo finally met Tommy's eyes. We sank ships today, destroyed supplies. That's mission accomplished. But we also sent men to the bottom of the ocean. Japanese sailors who were just doing their jobs, following orders, same as us. Tommy was quiet for a moment. You're not wrong. But this is war. We didn't start it. We're trying to end it. Every ship we sink, every supply convoy we destroy, it shortens this nightmare. It brings us closer to going home. And if the cost is our humanity, then we remember who we're fighting for. Tommy reached across the table, tapped the pocket where Davo kept Margaret's letter. We're fighting so our families don't have to. So our children grow up in a world without this madness. That has to be enough. Davo wanted to believe that. Desperately wanted to believe that the ends justified the means, that the moral calculus balanced in favor of what they'd done today. But mathematics had never been good at measuring souls. Wing Commander Harrison entered the mess hall, and the noise immediately dropped. Harry looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his uniform rumpled, but his voice was strong. Gentlemen, I've just received preliminary assessment from command. Today's mission was a complete success. We destroyed or critically damaged 8 of 12 cargo vessels and severely damaged 2 destroyers. Intelligence estimates we eliminated approximately 3 months' worth of supplies bound for Japanese forces on Borneo. A cheer erupted from the assembled pilots. Harry raised his hand for silence. More importantly, we accomplished this with 0 fatalities. 4 aircraft sustained damage, but all pilots returned safely. That is exceptional work. More cheers. Command is already planning follow-up operations. We've proven that coordinated strikes against supply convoys can be devastatingly effective. You've all made a significant contribution to the war effort. Harry's eyes found Davo in the corner. Special recognition goes to Lieutenant Morrison, who not only successfully completed his attack run with a damaged aircraft, but also neutralized an enemy fighter that posed a direct threat to the squadron. Well done, Morrison. All eyes turned to Davo. He felt his face flush. Thank you, sir, he said quietly. After Harry left, pilots began dispersing, heading to their quarters to rest before the debriefing. Tommy stood, clapped Davo on the shoulder. Get some sleep. You've earned it. Davo nodded, but he knew sleep wouldn't come easily. 08:30 a.m. officers' quarters. Davo's quarters were sparse, a narrow cot, a footlocker, a small desk with a lamp. On the desk sat a framed photograph. Margaret on their wedding day, smiling radiantly, flowers in her hair. He sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the photograph. What would he tell her? In his letters, he kept things vague. General. Flying missions. Everyone is safe. Missing you terribly. The truth. The blood. The fire. The men drowning in burning oil. He kept locked inside. Husbands and wives were supposed to share everything. But how could he share this? How could he burden her with the weight of what he'd done, what he'd seen? He pulled out paper and a pen. His hand hovered over the blank page. My dearest Margaret, today was difficult, but I'm safe. That's what matters, I suppose. He stopped, crossed it out, started again. My dearest Margaret, I flew a mission today that was successful by every military measure. But I find myself questioning what success means, what victory costs, not in terms of fuel and ammunition, but in terms of the pieces of ourselves we leave behind with each sortie. I shot down an enemy aircraft today. I try not to think about the pilot, whether he was young or old, whether he had a family, whether his last thoughts were of home. But I do think about it, constantly. I'm fighting this war so our daughter never has to. So she grows up in a world where questions like these don't need to be asked. I hope that's enough. I hope I can be the father she deserves after all this is over. I love you more than words can express. Kiss our daughter for me. Forever yours, David. He folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope. It would go through military censors who would black out anything deemed sensitive. They'd probably remove most of it. But Margaret would understand what he couldn't say. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Tommy entered, looking concerned. You all right, mate? You've been quiet since we landed. Just writing to Margaret. Good. Tommy sat on the footlocker. Listen, I know today was rough. First confirmed air-to-air for you. That changes something inside. I remember my first, over Rabaul, 2 years ago. I barely slept for a week. How did you get past it? Tommy considered the question carefully. I didn't get past it. I learned to carry it. There's a difference. What we do up there, it's necessary. But it's not easy. Anyone who says otherwise is lying or broken. Davo nodded slowly. The fact that it bothers you, Tommy continued, that's what makes you a good man. The day it stops bothering you, that's when you should worry. They sat in silence for a moment. Debriefing in 30 minutes, Tommy finally said. Get yourself together. We've got more missions ahead. After Tommy left, Davo lay back on the cot, staring at the ceiling. More missions, more convoys, more decisions measured in fractions of seconds, consequences lasting lifetimes. But somewhere, 7,000 miles away, Margaret was waiting. And their daughter was growing, preparing to enter this complicated, beautiful, terrible world. For them, he would fly again tomorrow. For them, he would carry this weight. For them, he would find a way home. The afternoon heat pressed down on the corrugated metal roof like a physical weight. Inside the briefing room, 16 pilots sat in wooden chairs, fatigue written across every face. The morning's mission had drained them, but Wing Commander Harrison's urgent call for a second briefing suggested their work wasn't finished. Harry stood before the map again, but his expression had changed. The stone facade had cracked, revealing something Davo had rarely seen. Excitement mixed with gravity. Gentlemen, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. This information came through command channels less than an hour ago. The room went completely silent. Harry pointed to a position on the map, southeast of their morning target. Coastwatcher reports indicate a second convoy departed from Brunei Bay at approximately 10 hours today. But this isn't a supply convoy. He paused, letting the weight of his next words build. This is an evacuation fleet. Intelligence believes this convoy is carrying senior Japanese military commanders, potentially including Admiral Takeo Kurita himself, along with critical documents and strategic assets. They're attempting to relocate command structure from Borneo to Java before Allied ground forces arrive. Davo felt his exhaustion evaporate, replaced by focused attention. An evacuation fleet meant high-value targets. It also meant desperate men with nothing to lose. The convoy consists of 3 fast cruisers, 1 light carrier, and 6 escort destroyers. This is the largest concentration of Japanese naval power remaining in Southeast Asian waters. Command believes this may be the final operational fleet Japan can field in this theater. Tommy let out a low whistle. They're asking us to attack that? With Corsairs? Yes, Harry said flatly. Because we're the only strike force within range. The carrier is damaged, engine trouble according to coastwatchers, which has slowed the entire convoy. They're currently making only 15 knots through the Celebes Sea. At that speed, they're vulnerable. Pat raised his hand. Sir, with respect, we flew a combat mission 6 hours ago. The men are exhausted. Several aircraft are still being repaired. I'm aware, Harry said, which is why this is a volunteer mission. No one will be ordered to fly. But understand what's at stake. If this fleet reaches Java, it consolidates Japanese defensive command. The war in this region could extend months, possibly years. If we strike now, we potentially eliminate Japan's ability to coordinate effective resistance. He let that sink in. We end it here, today, or we let them escape and face the consequences tomorrow. Davo's mind raced. Another mission, another battle. But this time against warships specifically designed for combat, with experienced crews and overwhelming firepower. His damaged Corsair hadn't been repaired yet. He'd have to fly a different aircraft, one he didn't know, hadn't tested, hadn't learned to trust. But Harry was right. This opportunity wouldn't come again. Davo raised his hand. I volunteer, sir. One by one, every pilot in the room raised their hands. Harry's stone facade cracked further. His voice became rough with emotion. I expected nothing less. But I want to be clear. This will be the most dangerous mission any of us have flown. The odds are not in our favor. Some of us may not return. He straightened, military bearing returning. We launch at 15:30 hours. That gives us 90 minutes to prepare. Weapons loadout will be maximum. All rockets, full ammunition. We'll approach from the north, using cloud cover. Attack pattern will be coordinated strikes against the carrier first, then the cruisers. The destroyers will defend aggressively. Expect heavy anti-aircraft fire. Pat stood. Sir, request permission to lead the assault. Granted. Morrison, you'll fly wing position on Squadron Leader Reeves. Chen, you're with Morrison. The rest of you, formation assignments are posted. Dismissed. And gentlemen? They paused at the door. Make this count. 15:15 p.m., flight line. Davo walked around his new aircraft, a Corsair he'd never flown before, freshly painted, the number 23 stenciled on the fuselage. She looked pristine, untested. No name painted beneath the cockpit. No history of missions survived. Bill Stone supervised the arming process personally. This bird's fresh from depot maintenance, Lieutenant. Engines rebuilt, new control surfaces, everything calibrated perfectly. She'll fly like a dream. Any bird that brings me home flies like a dream, Davo said. Bill hesitated, then spoke quietly. Sir, I've been working on aircraft for 15 years. I've seen a lot of pilots come and go. You're one of the good ones. So do me a favor and come back, yeah? Davo extended his hand. I'll do my best, Chief. They shook, understanding passing between them. Tommy approached, already in his flight suit. Ready for round 2? As ready as I'll ever be. You know, Tommy said, staring at the horizon. When this war started, I thought it would be about glory, about being a hero. But it's not, is it? It's about duty, about doing what needs to be done, even when it costs us pieces of ourselves. When did you become a philosopher? When I realized we might not survive the afternoon. Tommy turned, managed a smile. But we will. We always do. Pat gathered the pilots for a final briefing. Listen carefully. The carrier is primary target. If we eliminate it, we eliminate their air cover and their command center. 3 flights will focus on the carrier simultaneously, overwhelming their defenses. 4th flight engages the destroyers to suppress anti-aircraft fire. He looked at each pilot in turn. This is a coordinated strike. We go in together, we hit hard, we get out fast. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We accomplish the mission, and we come home, all of us. Understood? Yes, sir. Mount up, let's finish this. Davo climbed into the unfamiliar cockpit. The seat wasn't molded to his body yet. The controls felt slightly different. But the instruments were identical to his regular aircraft. Muscle memory would handle the rest. He pulled Margaret's letter from his pocket one final time, read the closing words. Come home safe. Come home soon. Our daughter needs to meet her father. He pressed the letter to his lips, then carefully tucked it back over his heart. The engine roared to life. 16:23 p.m. Celebes Sea, 40 miles east of Borneo. The Japanese fleet appeared on the horizon like a steel city floating on water. Even from 10 miles away, Davo could see the carrier, larger than anything he'd ever attacked, its deck bristling with anti-aircraft guns. Around it, the cruisers and destroyers formed a protective ring, their wakes white scars on the dark blue ocean. All flights. This is lead. Target confirmed. Execute on my mark. Davo's hands tightened on the stick. His new Corsair flew perfectly, responsive and smooth. But perfection didn't guarantee survival. The fleet had spotted them. Anti-aircraft fire began erupting from every ship simultaneously, a wall of explosive shells and tracer rounds filling the sky between the Corsairs and their targets. Now, Pat commanded. 16 aircraft dove from 3,000 feet, splitting into coordinated attack vectors. The air became a chaos of sound, engines screaming, Guns firing, explosions detonating. Davo focused entirely on the carrier. It grew in his windscreen, impossibly large, impossibly intimidating. He could see sailors running on deck, gun crews tracking his approach. Tracers streamed past his canopy. Something struck his wing. A glancing hit, no serious damage. 2,000 feet, 1,500. A Corsair to his left exploded, hit directly by anti-aircraft fire. No time to see who, no time to grieve. 1,000 feet. The carrier filled his entire vision. He aligned his targeting reticle with the ship's island superstructure, the command center. 800 feet. 600. He pressed the rocket release. 8 rockets leaped forward, trailing fire. Simultaneously, every Corsair in the first wave released their weapons. Dozens of rockets converged on the carrier from multiple angles. The explosions were catastrophic. Rockets tore through the carrier's deck, detonated inside hangars, ruptured fuel lines. Secondary explosions chain-reacted across the entire vessel. Within seconds, the carrier was transformed into a floating inferno. Davo pulled up hard, clearing the fleet, his heart pounding. "Second wave, execute," Pat ordered. The next group of Corsairs attacked the cruisers with equal precision. More explosions, more fires. The Japanese fleet was being systematically destroyed, but the destroyers fought back viciously. Anti-aircraft fire intensified. Another Corsair took hits, trailing smoke, struggling to maintain altitude. "3 Baker is hit," a voice screamed over the radio. "Controls not responding." Davo watched helplessly as the damaged Corsair spiraled downward, unable to recover. The pilot, Lieutenant James Carter, a kid from Perth, only 20 years old, rode the aircraft into the ocean. No parachute. Gone. "All flights, withdraw," Pat commanded. "Mission accomplished. Break off and return to base." The Corsairs scattered, fleeing the devastated fleet. Behind them, the carrier was sinking, already listing 40 degrees. 2 cruisers were dead in the water, burning. The remaining ships were attempting to rescue survivors, their combat effectiveness destroyed. Japan's final fleet in Southeast Asia had been eliminated, but the cost had been paid. 17:45 p.m. Approaching Labuan airfield. 14 Corsairs returned. Davo flew in formation with Tommy, both exhausted beyond words. Below, Labuan appeared through the evening haze. Home, survival, another day granted. 2 Delta to 2 Charlie, Davo said quietly. "We made it." "We always do," Tommy replied, but his voice carried the weight of those who hadn't. After landing, Davo climbed from his aircraft on unsteady legs. Ground crews swarmed around, but their cheers seemed distant, muted. They'd won. They'd accomplished something historic. But 2 pilots hadn't come home. Harry met them on the tarmac, his face drawn. "Command has confirmed the carrier sank. Both cruisers will not make it through the night. You've eliminated the last organized naval force Japan had in this region. This will be remembered as one of the most significant strikes of the Pacific War." The pilot stood silent. "But we lost Carter and Walsh," Harry continued, his voice breaking slightly. "2 good men, 2 fine pilots. We'll honor them properly tomorrow. Tonight, rest. You've earned it." As the group dispersed, Pat approached Davo and Tommy. "You 2 flew like veterans today. I'm putting both of you in for commendations." "Sir, with respect," Davo said quietly. "I just want to go home." Pat's expression softened. "Soon, Morrison. The war's ending. Everyone can feel it. A few more months, maybe less, and you'll be back in Sydney with your wife, holding your daughter." "I hope so, sir." That night, Davo sat alone in his quarters, writing another letter to Margaret. His hands barely shook now. He'd become accustomed to the adrenaline, the fear, the aftermath. "My dearest Margaret, today we accomplished something that may help end this war sooner. I can't share details, but I can tell you this. I'm 1 day closer to coming home. 1 day closer to meeting our daughter. I've learned something important through all of this. War reveals who we are when everything else is stripped away. I've discovered I'm not particularly brave, not especially heroic. I'm simply a man who wants to live, who wants to see his family again, who's willing to do difficult things because they need doing. That will have to be enough. The war can't last forever. Eventually, the guns will fall silent. The fires will go out. And those of us who survive will have to learn how to live again in a world at peace. I'm ready for that world, ready to be the husband you deserve and the father our daughter needs. Until then, I fly. I fight. I survive. And I count the days until I hold you again. All my love, forever, David. He sealed the letter, placed it on his desk for morning post. Outside, the tropical night settled over Labuan. Somewhere in the darkness, the ocean held the wreckage of Japan's final fleet. Somewhere in that same darkness, 2 Australian pilots had found their final resting place. But tomorrow, the sun would rise again. Tomorrow, Davo would wake up, report for duty, and continue fighting for a future where his daughter would never need to know the weight of wings, the cost of victory, or the complicated mathematics of survival. Tomorrow, the war would continue. But someday soon, it would end. And Flight Lieutenant David Morrison would finally go home.